Metal magazine and Virus Comics. So, pleased to know most of the gentle folks to my right, center stage. I'm going to start from your left to right, just introduce everyone. And if you don't mind, I'll name the books that you're publishing with Heavy Metal, or would you rather my school?
No, you can name and shame. That is quite all right, yes.
I also might invent some of the titles. Let's see how well I get this. Far left, GMB Chomichuk, who anyone who's a fan of comic books that challenge ordinary conventions, well, you should know all four of these individuals up here, but Gregory GMB Chomichuk is on the left. Next to him is the letterer, Lyndon Radchenka, and also all-around genre challenger, good person. Jonathan Ball, who I've never met, is right of center, and the three of them together have worked on the Virus Imprint's book, The Eye Collector, which has the most terrifying monster I've seen in comics to date. As a tryptophobe, just be warned. To the right of that is Ken Janssens. Ken Janssens, right? I'm not pluralizing. Hindsight is the name of his book, through Heavy Metal, Virus Imprint. And just a round of applause from a number of people here who've outnumbered David A. Robertson's panel. So
yes.
First of all,
no, that's on the record.
And then we'll carry that to the four creators up here in front. So I think the best place to start is, I called for it, I should wait. My removing moderator from my LinkedIn profile as soon as this is done. I want to start for whoever the four of you is best to address this, you can all take it, but I'm sure most people have heard of Virus, but how it started, when it started, obviously it's COVID related, if you can tell me the name, but give us a few quick words about what that imprint is and how you came to be involved in the submission process.
Sure, I can speak to that, I think. Virus was an initiative by Heavy Metal Magazine to invite creator-owned projects under the umbrella of heavy metal. So they were encouraging creative teams to bring books to them and that they would help them reach a broader, wider audience. In brief, that's it. It's different from a typical deal with heavy metal where they may bring on a work-for-hire group. In this case, the creators retain control of their rights and work with heavy metal to then expand those projects into a broader audience. And we couldn't be happier to find a home like heavy metal for The Eye Collector, which frankly is probably the only home that you could find for a book this bizarre.
Yeah, heavy metal's got that track record, right, of being home to the bizarre, being home to things that challenge and disturb. And when I first heard the news and knowing who was involved, I was pretty thrilled for everyone here. Now, what was did they just open up that submission process? And how many books is Virus publishing at the moment before we?
That I'm not sure. We couldn't speak to that, but I can tell you this, that Jonathan and I had set out to make The Eye Collector. We had a conversation at one point to say, let's make the least commercial book we can make. Let's make it as strange and Byzantine as we can. Let's layer it with imagery and poetry and all of these other things that we love. And let's just make a thing we love, because the world is literally falling apart around us. And if this is our last kick at a creative can, let it be something that we've decided to do our way. And then when the call for submission came up from heavy metal, we just threw ourselves on the pyre and got pulled out for that.
Yeah, I think, Ken, didn't your book was out before ours?
So yeah, mine was a little different. I had already released the first issue or two on Comixology, and then either they saw it or I submitted to them. There was no open submit call when I did it. I just submitted to them because I liked their work and I was hoping that they'd like it too. And then out of nowhere, they called me up and asked to have a meeting. And the meeting was about, I thought it was going to be a meeting about what I could do for them to maybe get this made. And they said, okay, we're going to start publishing it this date. And I'm like, what? Let me catch up here.
So if anyone's keeping track as to who's ahead, right? We asked Heavy Metal, but Heavy Metal asked Ken.
So I got a point to the board.
All right, so there's a point on Ken's tally far exceeding ours, right?
But so I was unexpectedly very pleased about that, and then I had to get a different artist, though. The artist I had the first two issues left, and I don't think I ever found him again. He was in Croatia or something like that. So I got my longtime art collaborator Matt Martin, who's from Britain, and they stepped in, and then we started making them from there.
One thing I found kind of interesting about heavy metals working with them is, so we had, Gregory, I guess they had just opened up Virus to like a wider world of submissions, and Gregory had noticed this and sent it to me, and so we pitched it out to them. I sent them what we had at that time. We just had 6 pages and kind of outline of it. But then I got an email like, let's have a meeting, and I was like, okay, let's check it out. We booked this meeting, and as the meeting's kind of approaching, I'm looking at it closely. I'm like, Gregory, is the CEO of Heavy Metal meeting with us?
Yeah.
And it's the CEO.
And so the way he explained the story was it had sort of been passed over. Our book had been passed over by editorial already. Mm-hmm. And because the world was closed, he was looking at the slush pile, looking at the submissions, and then said, wait, no, this is the most heavy metal book there is. I'm going to get in touch with these guys myself. And so we had this feeling of like being taken to the principal's office for a moment. Right.
You were like, why? You're going to sue us? Like,
yeah.
Like the CEO be meeting with us.
Yeah.
But he was just a big fan of it. He had kind of dug it out of their pile and was just, enthused about it. And, right from then, we really have been surprised, honestly, with I mean, they're still an indie company, so maybe it shouldn't surprise us. But you think heavy metal, you think back to like, they've been around since the 70s, the 80s. They've had movies. They're a big operation. Even though they're an indie press, you don't expect to be hanging out with the CEO every time you have a meeting. At some point I'm like, are we ever going to meet anyone who's not the CEO?
Yeah. Now we expect it. So if there are other publishers here, we only take meetings with people right on the board. That's it.
What a humble brag.
It was interesting. I was like, but it just, I think, really went to show like how enthusiastic they seem to be as a publisher about things they like. Like they just put this book called BioRipple recently, which is a very weird and unusual but fascinating book. And we were talking to him recently. He was saying it was a similar thing where he'd kind of like, found this person out of nowhere and decided to throw a bunch of support behind him.
And I would like to take this moment, if you don't mind, Donna, for me to throw some praise on Lyndon. So a big thing, people ask a lot, like, how do you submit? How do you get your work together? How do you put the package together, whatever? The essential element to a good comic submission that is often forgotten. They say accidents happen like just a kilometer from home kind of thing. People will think like, okay, well, I got the art together. Oh, I did the script. Okay, we got the layouts are all done. We're going to just quickly letter this book and send it in. And that is where the crashes happen, right? In order for a book to be read, to be understood, it has to be concisely presented. And that is the letterer's job. So Lyndon, I really am sorry because I didn't leave much room for you. And Jonathan is constantly asking you to re-letter pages because we're the worst. So why don't you speak to that?
Well, no, it's not that you're asking me to re-letter pages. It's that every time I send in pages, the instructions I get back are, this is great, but make it weirder next time. And so then when I go back, I have to figure out what I can do that sort of goes against the grain of the house style of the mainstream publishers, but will still abide by the essential rules of comic lettering, which is to make sure that the story is being told without anyone realizing that you're doing it. So thankfully, you actually leave me lots of room now. Jonathan does not, he's not very verbose in his scripts, so there's lots of different ways that I can experiment with presentation and word balloons and captions, and it's a great way to push myself as a creative in that space, because it's not just I can't copy paste the same sort of style right. Issue to issue, because everything changes so much.
Wow. Ken, just in terms of other creators on your book, we have a team of 3 over here. Are we are you lettering and doing everything by yourself then?
I'm doing the lettering.
I know you have the other writers, right? Like colorists.
Yeah, the colorist is from, I'm going to say Argentina because I don't know exactly, but his name is Federico Taibo. He's extremely gifted, and Matt Martin from the States, so from Great Britain. So being the Winnipeg Creators panel, I couldn't Bring
Right, that's right.
Put it right here. Yeah.
Shout out to them in letters as well.
I did.
Oh, you did that?
Yeah.
I'm
I
sorry.
learned.
Have you always done your own letters on projects?
Yeah, I learned. I was doing something for. It was called Blue Water back then.
Oh.
It was,
We could tell you a tale.
Yeah, it was a Sherlock Holmes story, and the letter that was on there, I think he bowed out in the second or third issue or something like that. So I quickly studied and learned it, and then everything I've done in the last 10, 15 years I've done myself just because I can write. Then when the art comes in, I can put it in there, and A, I can edit if I don't like what I wrote before, or B, if there's not enough room or whatever, I can edit it that way for look too. So.
Jonathan never asked for changes.
Lyndon actually, didn't you learned because Lyndon's a writer of his own comics as well, and didn't you similarly learn lettering in kind of initially in that same way?
Yeah, one of the first things that anyone in the online comic space will tell you is don't do your own letters. But when I was making my first book, I was working with an artist, Stephen Call, and as we writers know, there's so much work that goes into doing, just in terms of pure man hours, in terms of making art pages, that when I was finished the writing of the script and Stephen was working, it felt like I wasn't really doing anything anymore. And I wanted to contribute more, so I started to learn how to letter. And so with that book, because we were publishing it ourselves, I think I was lucky enough to have been able to re-letter that entire book, 3 or 4 times, as I learned how to make the book look better and as I grew as a letterer. So that's exactly what I did. And I was about to pitch Ken on if he needed a letterer at the end of this panel, but I guess I'm kind of out of luck on that now.
Yeah.
Awesome. I want to just give each of you a chance then to pitch the story to those in attendance and listening online as well.
Oh yeah, let's make the writers do it. I'm just gonna watch.
I don't want to do this.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So we'll give Jonathan some time to prepare and make him go first.
Well, The Eye Collector is a surreal horror that, it really is, I think, in the spirit of old heavy metal. Like, I grew up reading heavy metal and just being excited about some of the stranger stories you'd see, like, Jodorowsky and Mobius together, or Jodorowsky and anyone really. Like, it's always like the most deranged, incredible thing. They always seem to team him in particular up with just an incredible artist. And even if I couldn't fully follow the story, because it was so surrealistic often in its development, it was always something I'd never seen before. And I found like heavy metal just had that vibe, especially at the time, like I grew up kind of reading in the 90s, but I was reading back issues and stuff, right? So, it just had that, level of kind of danger and excitement. And I really wanted to do a story that had that same surreality and that same kind of more of a horror vibe than heavy metal had. And, there's not really any kind of, it's not really violence or gore in The Eye Collector. It's just sort of more disturbing, creepy, cosmic kind of horror.
Yeah, we kind of have a mandate that something really bad is about to happen, and then the page turns. And so it's happening.
Yeah.
If you're imagining it, it's your fault.
But what it is fundamentally is the Eye Collector is this monstrosity who's sort of a cosmic, creature. He's in some respects a parasite on dreams, and he is sort of a combination of the boogeyman, the man on the moon, and the Sandman. And what he does is he gives humans what they want. He feels that he's helping them, but of course the worst thing you can do to a human is give them what they want. He doesn't understand how humans work, and so he sort of starts to infiltrate the life of this young boy Nathan, who is having has a very difficult home situation where he doesn't really feel like he has control over his environment, and he's kind of at the mercy of these people he doesn't really understand. And then the Eye Collector comes in and kind of amplifies everything that's sort of traumatic and wrong in that situation. And so that's sort of where the story begins. And then as it's been developing, it's become more and more about who this Eye Collector is and what are some of the things that he's doing in the world to try to kind of, in his mind, fix things.
I'm sold. Ken.
Hindsight is about a scientist who goes back in time to try to solve the Jack the Ripper murders with all the theories, all the evidence that has come out over the years since it happened, and so he thinks it's going to be easy. But of course, time doesn't want to give up the secrets, and he goes back and he runs afoul of the suspects, the police, anybody it feels like that time doesn't want him to figure out what's going on. And in the present, there's an ex-cop who's obsessed with learning who this guy is. He ran into him at a coin convention and got punched out by him, and he has no idea why. So he tries to investigate him in the present day, and it's basically about these two obsessed men in different time periods coming into a collision course as they both try to figure out the biggest mysteries of each of their lives.
Double soul, right? I'm sure everyone's feeling that way. Wow, gentlemen. I mean, both of those. When I think of heavy metal and the stories I read, I have to admit to some of the content, it was sort of a tucked in between other books on my shelf as a kid. But
That's right, yeah.
I managed to score some home because obviously there's some content that
The first stack of heavy metal that I ever got was from some older cousins. They're like, here's some comics for you. We know you like comics, little Gregory. Here are some Savage Sword of Conan, and here are some heavy metals. And put them in this bag and don't let your mom see them. And it really was. It's the thing about art is that the salacious nature of, say, a certain kind of presented story, you're able to revisit it in print again and see it for its craft after the shock subsides. And so even though you might look through early issues of heavy metal and be like, oh wow, there's a lot of skin in there, or they're leaning towards a certain audience, when you go back and you look at how those images are rendered and the actual thousands of hours it took to create those pages, and you realize that these are not frivolous pursuits, right? In the modern age of scrolling human forms that you can look at all day long if you want, the idea that you could dedicate 2 or 3 days of your life to rendering just that skin pigment or just that tone or just that position, it was for me as a young artist just astounding. It had never occurred to me that a person could work that hard to draw something you'd only look at for 2 seconds before you turn the page.
It also was, in the early days of heavy metal, that was more of a subcultural norm than it is now. And even heavy metal has been actually criticized lately for putting more clothes on Tarna.
I know.
Giving her armor and things like this. That in many respects, what was kind of shocking about heavy metal in the early days. And what kind of gave it that subcultural dangerous edge, it isn't really as frankly shocking anymore, and less of a just general concern of the subcultures. What has really held though is the continued interest in horror and fantasy and science fiction that has kind of a more experimental edge to it. I feel like that's sort of become the enduring legacy of it, and so where I think we kind of fit in it more, because really if you look at the Eye Collector, there's nothing in it that makes it similar to early heavy metal, but the vibe of the story and the kind of that surrealistic, the surrealistic art style, it does have shades of Mobius in many respects, even though it doesn't usually look the same.
It's sort of an incubating space that's safe from remix or remake culture. You're not constantly seeing in new issues of heavy metal a reboot of the last story that you read just a few months ago, right? They're presenting new stories all the time and new ideas, and it's that thing that I think has allowed it to endure. How we got involved, I'm not sure, but yeah.
Well, both synopses, I guess, sound perfect for heavy metal. I mean, they've obviously picked perfect people to have the virus line.
Now, I think, Donovan, you should pitch them Space Big Amadeus.
No. I'd love to, trust me, I would love to pitch the heavy metal. That is not, well, I could make it though.
Now, he's just being a low-key moderator, but Donovan is a pretty powerful comics maker in his own right here.
Go on. Okay, so Eye Collector, I know I flipped through and was immediately terrified of the book. I scare easily though, so go check it out yourself. But it's at your booth. It's at Jonathan and Gregory. You're both. Well, Lyndon, do you have your own booth as well?
I do have my own booth, but we do not have copies of the Eye Collector at it.
Well, you could.
He's got his own comics there.
Yeah.
How dare he?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're at booth 2731, and if
people know where that is.
Everyone knows where that is, of course. Right? You can't miss the big Eye Collector poster. And the other thing I'll just quickly mention, as we're kind of talking about our booths and whatnot, is the other thing that we're doing is I'm taking the same creative team and doing a Kickstarter for a new project, which is a bit more extremely horror oriented, called She-Wolf. And if you check that Kickstarter at shewolf.ca, do come by the booth and let me know if you back it, because I'll give you a free copy of the Eye Collector.
Dun, dun, dun.
And available online? Eye Collector from Heavy Metal?
Yeah, the first 5 issues are available.
Yeah, the first 5 issues are available online. We've got extra issues that are con exclusive at our booth right now that won't be out really for another 8 months or so, it sounds like.
If you want to skip the line, you can come right to us.
But you can get issues direct from. We've got print issues. Heavy Metal has print issues online. There's digital issues online. And it's they've just signed a co-publishing deal with this company called Whatnot, and so they're going to be soliciting the book later. In 2023, they're going to relaunch it and start soliciting it through Diamond and comic stores and so on. But it is available.
Yeah.
Right now, early.
And Ken, where can we get your work?
Hindsight soon will be on the Heavy Metal website. It was on there, then they redid their website, and then it got booted off, and now they're putting it back on. The first 5 issues, and then the 6 issues coming out really soon as well. So,
Excellent.
yeah.
Ken, I do have a question, a craft question for you.
Sorry, me?
Hi. Yeah, I'm fascinated with historical fiction, creating historical fiction, especially in the realm of comics. How much research do you do into all of the information of the Jack the Ripper murders that you're incorporating?
A lot.
Sub-question, have you solved the murders?
Yes.
Yes.
Like Alan Moore, did you solve them?
A lot, but mostly because I've been infatuated with it my whole life.
Okay.
The Jack the Ripper murders, Victorian mystery and Gothic, all that. I've been just fascinated with, and I've been fascinated with that since there was a 1988 miniseries with Michael Caine about it, and ever since that I've just dived in. I don't know. I think I have like 10 books on the subject, and when I was writing this, I had this massive chart, and then any time I knew where I was in the timeline with him, I'd be looking at the detective one, what happened, all the people I interviewed, the witnesses, and so I make sure I had everything lined up.
So how do you know when to deviate from it?
The story and the characters tell you pretty much. The book isn't about the Jack the Ripper murders. It's about the guy who's investigating in his problems, and so basically he's going on a path, and then and of course the Jack the Ripper murders happen on a timeline. So if he's at this point in his development, then he has to be at this point in the murder. So I'm not going day by day, so I'll go like, okay, this is day, and then he's 1 week later, this happens because it lines up with that, and it lines up with his character.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you think Alan Moore was right? Did he solve the Jack the Ripper murders?
I like what he had, but probably not. It's probably a no-name guy that no one knows.
So if you're doing a pull quote, make sure it has Ken's name and it just says Alan Moore was wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Flipping the double birds. Yeah.
You'll get your internet points if you do that.
If we will. Yeah, we will. Yeah, no. Don't mess with him. He's a wizard.
He's a wizard. That's actually literally true.
Yeah.
All right, opening up for other questions as well.
Yeah, if there are any questions in the crowd, you can shout them out or you can raise your hand and we'll restate the question as best we hear it so everyone else can hear it as well. Yes?
I think his name was Crumb. He made a comic of the book of Genesis. And my question is, he took the book of Genesis, he didn't write anything, he just took the exact words, he took the whole book and made it into a comic. And I read the book of Genesis, 20 times, 30 times, but I found that reading his version and his theories at the end really helped me understand things that I'd never thought of. But I've noticed that it's really hard in the comic. You'd think it'd be easy to find a Shakespeare play like The Tempest or something and find a word-to-word comic book. If I don't have comic drawing skills, but if it was me, I wouldn't create something. I'd just take one of these plays or one of these classic works to be the first person. Why isn't anyone doing that? That's my question.
Oh, okay. So I'm gonna frame your question I'm gonna like compress it and then ask you if I sort of got the spirit of it. Okay.
Okay.
So, what is the magic of comics that means it's difficult to put other media into it and it come out intact? Right?
But Crumb did that. Crumb was able to do that.
Yeah, why don't you
Did
see
he?
more straightforward adaptations
Yeah.
of like older works? You do see them sometimes. Like Gregory lent me a little while ago a adaptation that I forget who did it, but it was At the Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft. So it was pretty straightforward. Like it was pretty much had followed Lovecraft, although he had of course readjusted the language and made it kind of work more for comics. I suspect it's a formal, like the way, when I teach writing, I teach fundamentally that there's like 4 types of conflict that you have in stories. And each of them lends itself best to a particular medium. So of course you can do any type of conflict in any medium, but like it's generally true that if you're writing a prose fiction, what works best are characters that have internal conflicts as the overriding force. If you're writing a play, what works best is if social conflicts between characters are the overriding story force. If you're writing a movie, external conflicts tend to work best in that medium as the overriding, story narrative force. And in comics, my belief is that formal conflicts work best, like where you're literally like big versus small, red versus black, white versus blue. Like it sounds ridiculous to state them that way, but I think really that medium lends itself best to conflicts between sort of visual states, and for just the basic reasons that the mediums tend to inherently prioritize certain types of narrative conflict, it's hard to move one into the other. You can do it, but you typically have to restructure the thing fundamentally in terms of the conflict that drives the story, or it doesn't come off well. So that'd be my kind of answer. I don't know if it's the right answer, but that's
if you're looking for ones that are done like that, you have to go back a bit. In the 80s, there's a bunch of graphic novels that were the Shakespeare plays.
Yeah,
they're
you're
really
right.
nicely done. Of course, the entire play's not in there, but it's edited and it's got a good chunk of it, and those are pretty nice. And then there was a series that was in the 60s, 70s, I think it included in the 80s for a while, the 90s, that was called Classics Illustrated. And they did all the different types of work from Shakespeare plays to novels like Three Musketeers and stuff like that. And they basically distilled it very small down, because those comic books are only 22 pages, so you can't get the book. But it does a pretty good job of keeping the story in there. So if you're interested in that.
And since you're expanding space for time, what often is a caution is someone will bring me a short story and say, I think this would make a great graphic novel. And then 3 pages into their short story, you realize, well, that would be 220 pages of illustration. If every verb, right, needs to be portrayed, right, one character can perform 1 verb per panel of a story in comics. So not every story lends itself so clearly to a direct adaptation. If you have a lot of, frankly, verb forms in your story, you're going to need more pictures to show each of those steps. And so you have this massive accordion sort of file that happens where the story decompresses in a way that's not useful to the storytelling process, right?
The only other thing I would add to that is I'm not an artist, so I will let Gregory correct me if I am incorrect. But if I had the power to illustrate whatever I wanted, I'm not sure that I would want to use the limited time I have to illustrate something that already exists.
Well, I think that's a good answer. But now you can just use AI. You have all the time in the world.
That's true.
Yeah.
I mean, you can just make AI adaptation comics now.
Yeah, for whatever reason it did.
In fact, the first imprint comic, the first AI comic listed in previews is a direct adaptation of C.S. Lewis' essay that they fed into a robot, and then the robot illustrated it. Well, it's not, it didn't actually illustrate it, but it rendered out illustrations based on the essay. So you might be onto something. But I hope you aren't.
It's like not only just I'm sorry, I'm butting ahead, but it's like it doesn't have to just be enjoyable. I guess my point was it it helped me learn. Like the book of Genesis isn't like an awesome storybook. There's literally chapters of like 100 people, just names. It's like Jodab begot Methuselah, Methuselah begot Enoch. And then he just draws little faces. So it's like you guys have this incredible. You could do calculus handbooks. You could. It doesn't have to like just.
Why is it not more?
What's enjoyable? You guys could be incredible teachers, instead of vampires, zombies, Superman. And I know there's lots of comics out there. There are people. And if you look, every Shakespeare account, every Shakespeare I look for adaptation.
Well, I try.
That's teaching, though.
I was going to say that's what teaching is for, but I try to do a little inside-outside in my own work. So for every big monster fighting book I do, I'll do a book like Medicine, which is a graphic novel about the real emotional cost of a life in medicine. For every superhero book I did a book like Will I See, which is based on lived experiences, and it's a story that educates about the, horrific tragedies surrounding missing and murdered Indigenous women and children. So you can, in your career, lend yourself to teaching if you so choose, and that's your choice, but not your obligation.
I think the real answer in some ways to your question of why doesn't the teaching industry use comics more, I suspect it has to do with how you really do have a industrial age industry in many respects, that is very much still structured around training people to be employees of factories. But all the factories are in China now. And so there's a way in which it hasn't really caught up to the information age, and it hasn't in some ways caught up to more modern teaching methods that prioritize different learning styles. Like most teaching lesson plan, like most of the syllabus in many respects, I think is still geared towards audiovisual learners like myself, who are the minority among learners. And so I think you'll start to see more of that as the curriculum expands, and I think you're already seeing some of it to some degree. But I think in some ways the answer is less to do with the comics industry and more with just how the teaching industry works.
Any other questions?
Okay, since the artwork for comics takes so long, what would you say is the most important thing to get right, to make it all sort of work?
Oh, that is a good question. Wow, Donovan is nervous because he's not sure how he'd answer it either.
No, I see the exit. I've got
Yeah, he's got a clear line. Okay, so the question is, because art there's so much labor in getting a page of art, what's the important part to get right? I think you have to separate the answer into, am I writing a story myself and illustrating it, or am I collaborating with a group of people to present an idea that we've agreed upon? So in the instance of, it's my idea and I'm going to illustrate it, I think the most important thing to get right is to know what your story is really about from the very beginning. And this can be as simple as writing a sentence like, this story is really about the unrequited love between me and my mother, right? Whatever that sentence is. And then ask yourself every time you're finishing a page, does this page strengthen that idea or does it weaken it? And if you know that, you can evaluate whether your own story is being served by these images, right? Know what it's really about deep down. Yes, there's a plot. Someone has to do something, someone has to go somewhere, but ask yourself if you have this other thing. When working with collaborators, though, I think the most important thing is to know what we call the beat, or the essential element of the page, where everyone just agrees that by the end of page 6, right, that little boy has to have been eaten by the monster, right? And then you work backwards, like, okay, well, if page 6 is a page turn, then we're going to show his bones, right? So what happens before that and what happens before that? And how do you keep the page turns turning in such a way that the plot is served by the very mechanics of the story itself?
I would say, though, even as a writer, even more important than that in some ways is how do you want the reader to feel on that page? And whatever you can have to do to get to that place. For me as a writer, my obsession is I want to engineer and manipulate the reader's emotional journey through the pages. And so to me, like because I started in prose and poetry and even film writing and other things, moving to comics, the thing that I really had to learn, because I got just my first comics, the first comic I ever wrote. And I think the reason that I was able to come into it strong was not because I'm so great as a writer, but because I was paying attention to what Gregory and Justin and other people around me were doing, and what I noticed was there's certain things in the medium that you can use to control how the audience moves through it. So just learning simple things like, if you want to surprise people, it has to be on an even page, right? You put a cliffhanger, you put the at the last panel of each page, you want to have a question that the reader wants answered. Like just simple things that kind of move the reader through emotionally, or even just in terms of their desire to turn the page. Like to me, like engineering the desire to turn the page is the essential.
And if you're new to the effort of making things, make short stories and finish them. I think that's the other thing to get right. Everyone can start strong and everyone can be excited at the beginning, but you have to get all the way to the end of the story and finish it so you know what it is. And so the easiest way to do that is claw back your expectation and say, okay, can I tell a compelling story in 5 pages, in 3 pages, in 1 page? Steve Ditko has a great collection of 1, 2, and 3 page stories. Where he would be mandated. The artist is 3 pages short in this issue of whatever comic we're doing. By tomorrow morning, you have to give us a 3-page story. Tomorrow morning, you have to give us a 1-page story. He would never know how long it would be, and he would just have to write short, compelling, page-turning stories that didn't feel like they were add-ons.
And that's more practical, too.
Yeah.
If you're paying someone, it's your first time out, and you want to pay for art, and you want to pay for coloring and lettering, stuff like that. Doing it smaller, you can pay someone and get it done. And people, the publishers, stuff like that, if you want them to read something, you give them an 8-page comic, there's a better chance they're going to read it beginning to end than if you give them a graphic novel you've done and they're like, I don't have time for this, and put it down. So.
Publishers will read 3 pages of a terrible story that has potential from a person who's excited about joining the medium, and they will give you proper feedback on a 3-page story. But if you hand them a 200-page story, they will not read it.
Yeah, even me, I came out of the gate with, I'm going to do a 12-issue comic, right? It's going to be 2 6-issue stories. But even that, I really had to sit down and go, okay, can I get the whole idea across in 6 pages? And just, almost make a 6-page short story that wasn't really complete, but kind of felt like here's the whole idea.
That's our 5-minute warning, I believe.
Yeah, right next to you.
When did you guys realize that, you talked about being interested in comics as kids and stuff, but when did you realize that you actually wanted to go into it, and how did you get into it?
Yes, you may, but then I also know the exact moment in the time.
As do I.
Yeah.
I can tell you the date.
Okay, but we only have 3 minutes, so we gotta be quick.
Real quick.
We gotta be quick.
I was in law school. It wasn't fun. I wanted to do something that was fun. Okay, go.
I was 8 years old. I was in the barber shop, and a stack of coverless comics that the barber gave me when my dad was getting his beard trimmed. I've never looked back.
May 19th, 1983. I went to a drugstore, and they used to have these things called spinner racks that had comics on them, and I saw a comic book there, and I asked my mom for it. She said no. I had my allowance, though, and I bought it. It was Batman the Outsiders #1. Oh. I read it back to front 7,000 times, learned all the credits and everything like that, and from the day I bought it.
That's Halo and Katana and all those great.
From that point on, that was the one thing I wanted to do. I always wanted to be a writer, but that was the main kind of writer I wanted to be.
I was kind of similar. My deal with my mother was that if we went to church, then we would stop at the comic store on the way, like the grocery store, the drugstore, and I could get to buy 1 comic. And they just have random comics there because it was a small town. And they happened to have the reprinting of Sandman #6 there once. And I picked up Sandman #6, which, if you know that comic, is the Dr. Destiny in the diner. Sandman doesn't even appear until the last panel. It's just this nightmare of these people being just mercilessly slaughtered one by one by having their minds hijacked in this diner. And And then at the end, when it's too late and they're all dead, the Sandman shows up and he's like, oh, what's going on? I was like, I've never seen anything like it before. And I haven't even really, I feel like that, it just blew my mind. I was like, oh my God. I go, is this what you can do in comics? Like, I'd never seen anything like it. And so, it took me a while to kind of come around and actually try it myself, but that was really like a moment for me.
This is fun, Ken.
Yes, you absolutely.
Spider-Woman #1. This is going to come out wrong in the wrong context. Backseat of a 1978 Oldsmobile Cutlass.
Oh no.
This is how all good love stories should start.
You and a copy of Spider-Woman #1.
In the dark.
Oh.
You know what? I think I'm done. No, and my mom was driving me home from my grandmother's, picked me up late, had that comic, found it on the bottom of the floor, and with each passing street light, I had a second and a half to get a glimpse of that panel, and then darkness, and just that repetition of the strobe.
Yeah, that's a great story.
Yes.
I've never been so frustrated by darkness in my life, so it was great. That hooked me, and yeah.
Amazing.
Anyways, great stories. That was fantastic.
All right.
And great question.
3:58. Do we need 2 minutes to exit, or are we good for any other closing remarks? Let's go there, because I think we've had some questions.
Closing remarks.
Anyone want a final pitch on your book, or what else you're working on?
How dare you answer that
I guess
question?
we just talked about other things we're doing.
Yeah, please.
Last year I wrote a movie, a feature film, and it came out. It's called The Return, and you can watch it on demand. It stars Richard Harmon from the CW's The 100. I'm currently working on a web series for Moonrise Productions in Ottawa, so I hope that they're going to shoot that next summer. I'm writing a couple other short comic books and stuff like that.
And I'm doing a Kickstarter for She-Wolf, shewolf.ca, and again, if you go check it out, Kickstarter, come to my booth, I'll give you a free comic. But otherwise, even past the con, if you're listening to this later, shewolf.ca.
Come stop by Stephen Call and I's booth upstairs at the Infinite Studio booth. We'll talk to you about our new book coming out with SourcePoint Press next year, There Was Another Life. We have the first issue with an exclusive cover. Make comics.
If you want to track me down, you can find either a Cold War psychic espionage story set in an alternate history, 1950s, where all the money that was spent on atomic research was spent on psychic research instead. Or you can come and find the Moon Patrol, which is about haunted robots fighting monsters on the moon.
Man, some days you wake up and think, dang, I'm a creative fella. You don't think that. You never met me. I think that. I put to shame getting these four people here. It's fantastic. Please go to the booths upstairs. I guess, Tanner, do you have a booth?
No, supply chain issues. I couldn't get it in Denver.
Apologies for bringing that up.
And a round of applause to you guys. Thanks for coming to see us.
All 10 of you.
Yeah.